Yeah, Charlie, turning to Vaughn's reporting, does the president have the authority to freeze federal money already allocated by Congress?
Well, this funding has been authorized and appropriated by the Congress. It's the law. Now, I do believe that the president has some authorities to pause funding for cause. If there might be some issues, they could do that. But this is an across the board. It's almost like, I don't know if it's not an impoundment, but it just strikes me that the president is in serious legal peril over this one. As Vaughn just pointed out, I mean, Pell grants, grants to states for transportation projects. Are hospitals going to receive their Medicaid funding? I don't know the answers to these questions. This is overly broad. I suspect the president is way out over his skis and is going to be sued over this one for sure. But if I'm a Republican appropriator, and I was, as was your brother, I mean, I would be incensed that monies that have been appropriated by the U.S. Congress are not going to be spent on the programs for which they have been intended by executive fiat. I mean, this is, I think this is really out of bounds. And people are there are going to be real consequences to people across the country and the world, for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, Alencia, just in the last couple of minutes, the top Democrat in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, weighed in on Trump's move to freeze all this money. Let's listen to this.
This is a dagger at the heart of the average American family in red states, in blue states, in cities, in suburbs, in rural areas. It is just outrageous.
Alencia, is there anything Democrats can do about this?
Listen, I hope that Democrats, after Election Day when Trump won, that they looked at Project 2025 and said, what are we going to do to respond to this? Because all that we are talking about that happened in the last 24 hours or the last week is literally in that playbook. And the people that wrote that said they want to inflict harm and trauma on folks. And we are experiencing that. And so Democrats have to be very clear with the American people, not just people who vote Democratic, but the people who are going to be hurt by this, who may have voted for Donald Trump or stayed home, all people, that not only are these the problems, these are the solutions, and these are the people that we should trust in the next 2 years to fix them. I also think we need to be seeing some Democratic governors and state legislators and attorneys generals out here as well, talking about what they are going to do to protect the people in their states. This is an opportunity for Democrats to get on the offense, because the Republicans have shown us clearly that they're all going to ride with Donald Trump with this egregious plan to just really gut the foundations of our country and have low-income people and people of all backgrounds face the brunt of that. And so Democrats have an opportunity here, but we don't have that much time to communicate that, and hopefully that they're planning for that very soon.
And so, speaking of time, back to you, Charlie, on your comments that this proposal or this freeze is in serious legal peril. What does that peril possibly look like? And then, to Alencia's point that a lot of this has to do with time, what does serious legal peril mean, and how long would that be before it takes effect?
Well, just like with the orders on immigration, I suspect states' attorneys general are going to begin filing lawsuits to try to recover money that is owed to their states and local government entities. That's probably a place to start. And I don't know if this order extends to, say, contractors. Are we going to pay military contractors? He's pausing federal funding. I'm not sure what this means. And I don't think anybody knows until people start getting denied payments for critical services. Students, have to process their student loan applications, and they have to have Pell grants. I mean, what does this mean? I suspect, there are going to be all sorts of people who are impacted, who are going to be seeking legal representation to collect the monies that have been enacted into law that they are owed.
Courtney, meanwhile, the president also signed 4 executive orders to address what he called military readiness. What are some of the changes in the orders?
Yeah, so a couple of these are not a huge surprise. They are ending diversity programs and initiatives within the Department of Defense. We were expecting that. We don't exactly know what that's going to look like, but we do expect it to be pretty widespread Also, as you mentioned, ending service for transgender individuals. What's key here, Jose, is that also includes stopping medical treatment for dependents of service members across the board who need medical treatment for transgender care, transition care. That will also have sweeping effects. In addition to that, there was one that was kind of surprising and may be a little confusing to some of our viewers. President Trump signed an executive order establishing an Iron Dome for America. Now, that does not mean that there will be an Iron Dome like we see in Israel protecting the skies over America. Rather, that's sort of more of a concept, an idea that there would be this almost a force field over the United States protecting it. The difference is the U.S. needs protection from ballistic missiles and this new advanced hypersonic capability that countries like China have already been testing. Essentially, they have the ability to, or they're trying to get to acquire the ability to put a missile up in space. It can circle around the space over and over and over and then just drop out of the air anywhere in the United States, frankly, anywhere in the world that they want. It's very difficult to defend against. And basically what this order is saying is the Trump administration wants to accelerate efforts to build a space defense against that. Critics have been concerned about the idea of building something that, for all intents and purposes, is a weapon in space because it could lead to an arms race that could threaten U.S. civilian and military assets like satellites that are already up in space. Now, there's a period here where the U.S. has to come back and say, this is how we would establish this space-based defense architecture, what it would look like. But essentially realistically, what this could mean is the U.S. would have space-based weapons that would be able to take out missiles while they're in the space phase of the arc before they're able even to break back through the atmosphere and threaten the United States back on the ground. So it's called an Iron Dome for America, but it's, Jose, I got to tell you, it's really so much more. It's very different than the Iron Dome. The fourth and final, also not a surprise executive order, because President Trump announced it at the inauguration. That is allowing service members who were separated from the military for refusing the COVID vaccine. They can now come back. That's already been in place since 2023. The difference here, Jose, they will now be eligible for years of back pay and be reinstated at the rank they were separated at. So, again, not hugely surprising executive orders, but as you mentioned, widespread impact across the U.S. military, Jose.
Courtney, that whole concept of the Iron Dome and the creation of it, or the start of the process for an Iron Dome as an executive order, kind of reminds me a little bit of what Reagan did with SDI, which was really an invention at the time. He didn't have the wherewithal to be able to produce that at the time, but it was used strategically at the Reykjavik meeting, the first Reykjavik meeting between Reagan and Gorbachev. But that also kind of came about as an executive order.
Yeah, exactly. And the big difference here, I think that they calling it Iron Dome for America is almost making it more accessible for everyone to understand. You can think of an Iron Dome, what that would mean for defending the United States skies, right? But it's really so much more than that. This is already something, by the way, that's been in development and under research for years, frankly, the idea of how the U.S. can defend against these very advanced hypersonic threats. But this seems to be a direct order from the President of the United States to accelerate those efforts. So we'll see exactly how fast they can go and whether, in fact, they can field this space-based defense.
Courtney Kube, it's always great seeing you. I thank you very much. Charlie, before I let you go, later this week, Tulsi Gabbard is going to be holding her confirmation hearings. You served in Congress at the same time as Tulsi Gabbard did, who President Trump nominated as Director of National Intelligence. When you were the chair of the Ethics Committee, you had a conversation, or a series of conversations, right, with her about that trip that she was planning to take to Syria in 2017?
Yeah, in January 2017, just after President Trump was elected, she had called me about asking for my approval for her to go to Syria. As fate would have it, I was on the Ethics Committee for 8 years, and my chairmanship had just ended within hours, actually. It was just before the new Congress was to be sworn in. And so I was not in the position to approve or disapprove her travel. to Syria because it was privately funded. They would need the permission of the ethics committee. And I just said to her, hey, as your friend Tulsi, because I know Tulsi, we're friends. I always enjoyed serving with her. And I said, hey, Tulsi, I'm not so sure it's a great idea given the security considerations with, ISIS being on the march, al-Nusra Front, and also, of course, their political and potentially propaganda issues with regard to the regime, the Assad regime. So that's how the conversation more or less ended. She obviously went, so she must have gotten approval somehow. But I was no longer chair, but I remember that conversation very vividly.
Yeah, and it was going to be a privately funded trip. I guess that's not unusual either.
Correct.
And there have been members of Congress that have gone to all kinds of places, dictatorships and countries that exploit and destroy their own people. But I'm just wondering, do you think that in and of itself should disqualify her?
Well, look, people are going to challenge her credentials because of her statements about Russia. It sometimes seemed to parrot Russian talking points. She was obviously too close to Assad for comfort for many. She has had all sorts of problems with various authorities for the intelligence agencies, and she has recently reversed herself on some of those authorities. So for all of these reasons, I think that she may have some real problems getting confirmed. She doesn't have a natural Republican constituency in the United States Senate.